welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
This is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and our guest today is...
I'm Jane Igharo, author of The Sweetest Remedy.
And this was one of the sweetest books I've read in a very, very long time.
Thank you.
It's so sweet. And I think it's going to hit a lot of notes that people are going to love. So this... You know what? Why don't you tell everybody the what the story is about, and we can talk a little bit about it.
Sure. Okay, so The Sweetest Remedy is about a biracial woman called Hannah Bailey. She is part Nigerian and part white, but she's never had a relationship with her Nigerian father. But when he dies, she's invited to the funeral in Nigeria. So after much contemplation, she decides to go, and while there, she meets her siblings who are like basically Nigerian royalty. And she also meets a family friend who she develops a romantic relationship with. But Hannah really discovers a lot about herself, her culture, her father while there, and connects with her siblings. It's a story about self-discovery and determining the kind of person you want to be, basically.
So her love interest, because you actually meet him before you meet any of the siblings, unbeknownst to Hannah. She's at a party and she's talking to this guy who's being exceptionally rude about just her being biracial and trying to flatter her, and obviously asking her questions like, where are you from? And considering that Hannah doesn't even know her dad, it's like, it's not only are the questions rude, but it's like twisting a knife even further that, she's, And then she meets Lawrence directly after the guy Blaine, which is like, no apologies to anybody named Blaine, but I think like Blaine is like one of those names from like the 80s movies of like, the guy with the popped collar who you're just like, oh no, stay away from him. And he's that guy, which I'm sure there are lovely Blaines out there, so apologies to them. But she meets Lawrence, who is automatically intriguing and dreamy. And he leaves the party because he immediately gets bad news. And then you hear that Hannah gets bad news. And what's interesting about it, and what makes this, I think, something that's going to appeal to a wide audience of people who like love stories and family stories, is it's got that meet cute aspect of it. They don't know that they have a connection. Hannah thinks there might be a romantic connection, and you can tell that Lawrence feels, a spark in her, but they don't know how connected they are until, spoiler alert, they meet in Nigeria, because he is very well acquainted with Hannah's family.
Yeah. I love situations like that, like the meet again situation. Like, haven't we met before? I love those circumstances. That was also in my first book, The Ties That Tether. So I was like, I'm going to do it again.
So she meets this big Nigerian family, and she does start to connect with this father that she never knew through her half siblings. But her half siblings also have to contend with the fact that there were things that their father, who they loved very much, kept from them. Yes. And they all deal with things in different ways. So tell us a little bit about this story and how it came to be.
Well, I was thinking of an idea for my second book, and I came up with an idea kind of close to this, but it wasn't too solid. And I was rewatching one of my favorite Nigerian movies called Chief Daddy, and I really love that movie. And it just clicked. This book was hugely inspired by that movie, Chief Daddy. About a big family who come together for the funeral of their father. and secrets are revealed. It's just a chaotic mess, and I loved the mess of it all. And I thought it would be cool if I put a spin on it and made it my own.
So it's funny because I just looked up Chief Daddy, and it looks like it's available on Netflix.
It is, yeah.
So I think anybody who this book sounds like it would be one to enjoy. Check out Chief Daddy, and it looks like there was a sequel as well.
They're working on a sequel. I'm incredibly excited. It's such a chaotic and funny mess.
So in a way, so is this book. It's just, and it's so sweet. So there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Am I getting it right? There was Tiwa, there's the twins. I'm just
and Shagun. Yeah,
yes,
4 siblings.
Yes. And then there's Lawrence, who practically grew up with them as a sibling. And there was just that funny moment of Hannah being like, oh no, I'm not attracted to someone who's related to me.
Yes.
That was funny. Which was very cute. But I love that each of the siblings, they're grieving in their own way, and they grow to love Hannah as their sister in their own way.
Yes.
And, she learns a lot about Nigeria. I mean, having no real, connection to her heritage, she, becomes immersed in the food and just in the world of her siblings. And it was just a really good journey to go on with her.
Yeah. Thank you. I really enjoyed writing about Nigeria. Before writing this novel, I hadn't been to Nigeria in like years, maybe like 17, 18 years. So I went back while writing this book for my uncle's wedding. And it was such a great time to go because I got to experience Nigeria sort of like a foreigner. And it was also familiar to me. So it was the new and the old. And it was such a good experience. And I just put a lot of my experiences and what I saw into the book. And that was fun.
It was fun to read. And it was also, again, interesting to see how many misconceptions Hannah had about, her own, like the country of her heritage. There's like a, really, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but, she has different bonding with the different siblings. And she automatically thinks that if somebody says something costs what seems like an exorbitant amount, she thinks they're speaking about a Nigerian currency that is less, but she finds out like, no, actually, we're talking about US dollars, which
in one situation, yes, a huge shock for her.
But I think that she's such a sweet character, and she was so just sort of like open-hearted that she was willing to accept, like, okay, in this situation, I'm the person who doesn't know a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you were writing each of the siblings, were they, how did you sort of decide who was going to be what and who was going to, have what type of thing going on in the background?
Yeah. So, some of the characters are based on like real people. The twins were based off 2 sisters who are actually sort of like the Jolades in real life. They're the daughters of an incredibly wealthy Nigerian entrepreneur. And his 2 daughters, they live in England. One is a DJ and the other is a fashion blogger. And so they inspired the characters of Dami and Shola. And Tiwa was inspired by a Nigerian singer called Tiwa Savage. I have an image of how I think she is, like very confident and bold and assertive. And I wanted that for Tiwa in the book. And Shagun, if you ever watch Chief Daddy,
yes,
Shagun is inspired by one of the characters who you would know immediately. But Shegun in this book was I wanted to make him a bit more vulnerable so that there was a reason why he acted the way he did. Yeah.
Well, first of all, like I mentioned earlier, I am now going to watch Chief Daddy after I interview you.
You enjoy it.
Yeah, no, but I love Chegon, and I just like all of the siblings, just the way that they dealt with everything was just so sensitively and authentically. And it's difficult, I think, when you're not just reading a book about grief, but I think also when you're writing a book that has grief in it, to kind of show all of that. And there's so much more. I don't want listeners to think that this is a book just about grieving, because it has a lot of comedy in it and just a lot of love. But it was just a really nice blend of here are all of these wonderful characters, and here are how they are dealing with not only the death of their father, but also learning that their father wasn't perfect, and learning that they have a sibling that they could learn, that they could get to know, and her learning that she needs to learn about herself by connecting with her siblings.
Yeah. That was definitely a very huge part of the book, about Hannah learning about herself and also deciding who she wants to be with that information that she had, but not letting that information determine who she is, but maybe help her a bit more to come to her own decision.
Definitely. And I have to ask, so did you when did you start writing this book?
I don't know. I'm really bad with like dates and years. I think like maybe in 2019 or 2019. Yeah.
I ask because you had mentioned you had traveled back to Nigeria, and whenever we talk about with authors, just when you started writing the book, there's always like this pre-pandemic and post-pandemic look at things. Mm-hmm. Like it's either like I was writing it when the world was my oyster and everything was open and I could go anywhere, or I've literally been in my house and haven't spoken to another soul since March 2020.
Yeah, I went at a good time. It was December 2019. So when I came back, my family and I came back in January, that's when things started to progress. That's when I was like, oh my God, what is this situation you're talking about a pandemic? And then like months later, things got really serious and haven't left this country since.
Well, I certainly hope for a lot of us that that's going to change, because it would be a shame if our worlds are still so closed off. But clearly, we want to be safe. But what I did like, you talk a little bit about, or there's parts that talk about Nigerian cuisine. Mm-hmm. Do you have some favorite dishes that you would like to shout out?
Yes. Well, I won't be an authentic Nigerian if I didn't mention the best jollof rice. Yes, it's just like a staple everywhere. I recently learned how to make it because it's very intimidating. I've depended on my mother for years, but I recently said I'm going to do it. And I found a recipe online, and I must say that I killed it. And my mother said it's the best she's ever had. So jollof rice is the best African cuisine. It's one of my favorite.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And are you working on another book at the moment?
Yes, I just finished my third novel. I handed that in a few weeks ago. It's called Worth Having, and it should be out September next year as well.
Oh, very nice. So September seems to be the general release date for you.
I'm hoping that would change one of these years and I'll get a summer romance, but that depends on me and how quickly I write.
Well, I think that this book is wonderful. I think it's going to have a very wide audience, and
Thank you.
it would be really cool if this was a Netflix movie or a Netflix
Feel so
series.
too. I feel like that's the right thing for Netflix to do.
Netflix, if you're listening, the
If you
Sweetest
are,
Remedy is
yes.
yeah, it's got like a whole it's got an ensemble cast, and you should adapt it.
Please do.
All right. Well, Jane, this was wonderful. I cannot wait to talk to you next September about your next book, and then also about the next Netflix adaptation of this.
Hopefully.
and about Chief Daddy.
Yes.
And this book is due out the last week in September. Am I correct?
Correct. September 28th.
So rush to your library, your bookstore, wherever you find your books, and check out The Sweetest Remedy. Thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
All right. So this was Jessica with Turn the Page podcast, and we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.